Okay, we're just going to get started. Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today and welcome to the panel. A huge thanks to all the artists who shared your work with us today, and there's also going to be a day 2 tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. And especially a huge thanks to Ina, Chen, Calvinson, and Lou for your performance earlier. It was really amazing to see that happen in real time, so thank you again. I also wanted to thank the entire team at LACE for your support over the past year, helping bring this special screening program to life. My name is Carrie, and like Sarah mentioned earlier, I'm an artist and educator based in Los Angeles, and my art practice primarily revolves around 3D animation and installation, and the themes of memory, mythology, and intercultural experiences are really central throughout my work. And as the 9th emerging curator at LACE, it's been such a fantastic experience being able to explore these themes with other artists through a lot of meaningful dialogues and hearing how they take it beyond existing thresholds. So this curation emerged from these conversations over the year, and particularly from the standpoint of living between cultures, navigating diaspora, and how artists can excavate and revisit memories today. For those of us with immigrant and transnational backgrounds, our stories are woven from bits and pieces and forming narratives that are often associative and fragmented. We find connection through sounds, light, textures, and history, elements that help us make sense of our present. The works showcased today, ranging from animation to live performance, transcend specific technologies or aesthetics. They encourage us to engage on a more tactile level, to feel the images rather than merely observe them. I'm really excited to introduce our panelists for today, artists Qianqian Ye, Heesoo Kwon, and curator at SFMOMA, Karen Cheung. I'll just go ahead and introduce the bios for a little bit as an introduction. Qianqian Ye is a Chinese artist, creative technologist, and educator based in Los Angeles. Trained as an architect, she creates digital, physical, and social spaces exploring issues around gender, immigration, power, and technology. Their most recent collaborative project, The Future of Memory, was a recipient of the Mozilla Creative Media Award. At the Processing Foundation, Qianqian is the lead of P5JS, which is an open source art and education platform that prioritizes access and diversity in learning how to code, with over 1.5 million users. She currently teaches creative coding as an adjunct associate professor at USC Media Arts, my fellow colleague, and 3D arts at Parsons School of Design. Heesoo Kwon, who's joining us from the Bay today, we're very lucky to have you here. Heesoo is a multidisciplinary artist based in San Francisco. Positioning herself as an artist, activist, archivist, anthropologist, and religious figure, Kwon builds feminist utopias in the digital realm that liberate one from personal, familial, and historical trauma rooted in patriarchy. Central to her practice and substantial bodies of work is Le Musun, an autobiographical feminist religion she initiated in 2017. This religion is a form of personal resistance against misogyny and an ever-evolving framework for investigating her family histories. Kwon utilizes technologies such as digital archiving, 3D scanning, and animation as her ritualistic and shamanistic tools to regenerate her women ancestors' lives without constraints of time and space, and to queer her past, present, and utopian dreams. Karen Cheung here, who will be moderating our conversation, joins us also from the Bay, and Karen is a writer and researcher currently exploring the ephemerality and affect of performance art in the context of audience participation. Her writings have appeared in Art Practical, Open Space, March Journal of Art and Strategy, and Voices in Contemporary Journal. She has held various positions at CADIS, the Vancouver Art Gallery, Daeyoung Museum, and Asian Art Museum of San Francisco. She is currently Curatorial Associate of Media Arts at SFMOMA. Thank you again for all being here, and let's just get started. Karen, it's so great to have you here.
So Carrie, I've been thinking about your program today, and a lot of it's mediated through the screen, your film program that you curated, also expanded cinema, but a lot of the experiences we just have witnessed and participated in kind of demanded our physical engagement with them. We're sort of embodied in all these experiences, a lot of sensorial engagements. So I wanted to start with your curatorial thesis for the program about intercultural cinema, and begin with, also you're thinking from traversing between the physical realm to the digital, and then eventually also leading us to spiritual moments for the artists that you've worked with. So let's begin with the physical. Want to think about your program title that includes the idea of fossil and ruins, which are physical traces of the past and that's left us. And what do you think in terms of how these works relate in the exhibition relate to the physicality and your especially Laura Mark's concept of haptic visuality in intercultural cinema?
Yeah, thanks so much, Karen, for the really thoughtful question. When I think of memory, for me, oftentimes it feels like this perpetual process of digging, revisiting an archive, like a site of excavation. And throughout this curatorial process, I've been really thinking through what that means and its sort of immaterial manifestations. And then thinking about, the process of filmmaking, each image essentially is like a ghost, an echo of the past, or sort of an haunting sort of after image of a past reality. So, with those ideas in mind, approaching this curation and throughout the process, I've been just really intrigued through my conversations with artists and learning about how artists, especially coming from intercultural and transnational backgrounds, engage with the theme of memory through largely immaterial or transient mediums. Why would that be? Like game engine simulation, real-time performance, or even just physical bodily movement in general. So I think the idea of haptic visuality that Laura Marks brings up in her book, The Skin of the Film, it's a type of visuality that is sort of thinking about, eyes as not just organs for sight, but also as inference devices, where seeing an image might trigger a physical memory, with whether that be, a specific smell, a specific taste, or even a texture. And I think that sort of physical inference through one's sight and through viewing an image is something that is really powerful, and I think is something that a lot of artists coming from intercultural backgrounds and transnational identities can really relate to, because as people living between spaces, oftentimes our memories are fragmented and associative because we don't necessarily have all the information. There are missing parts, and we rely on this sort of association with senses to make sense of our present moment. And I think, this idea of haptic visuality that Marx brings is also not bound by any specific technology or aesthetic, which is why the works that we're seeing today range from, 3D animation to performance to, other mediums like game engine simulation that we'll see more of in tomorrow's screening. But yeah, that's a really good question. Definitely, I think the idea that Marx brings kind of encompasses the overarching theme behind a lot of these decisions that I've made.
I've thought a lot about you bringing Qianqian and Heesoo into this panel. They're both building these virtual worlds, but both also are cross-cultural and transnational, like Heesoo's garden from her garden in San Francisco to the land in Korea, and then Qianqian's is two worlds between, that are across the Pacific Ocean. So what do you think in their work brings that sense of embodiment in this, bringing these multicultural experiences together?
Yeah, I definitely thought a lot about that, and sort of the similarities and differences between both of your works. They both engage with natural elements. Heesoo engages with nature, the garden, this like lush sanctuary that hosts avatar representations that you've created, where you also engage with mythologies through our conversations. I know that you are inspired by Korean folklore and creation myths. And Qianqian as well, you explore mythologies that are trans-Pacific with your collaborator, Tiara Rabo, who is currently in Hawaii. And you both explore this idea of distance that is both geographical but also cultural. And I think, your representation of Mazu and Homea is so abstracted. It's made from this like woven, ever-evolving tapestry of microplastics. So I think this idea of, approaching representation of these deities and representing this sense of in-betweenness is something that is really fascinating. Qianqian, your work, I think, touches on a lot of digital materiality through the form and the way that these microplastics are evolving and moving, and through dialogue as well. And with Heesoo's work, I think your work is just so rich in detail and imagery, and it's almost like I can feel the wind blowing in my face and like leaves falling down. So even though I don't speak Korean, but I feel like I could still sort of sense the emotion and ideas that you're trying to bring through with the audio and with everything that you've imbued within the work.
Okay, we'll stick to the, we'll extend on the idea of mythologies and how it's represented in the digital realm. So both of your works include actually goddesses, several goddesses from different cultures. Mazu, the Chinese sea goddess, Haumea, the Hawaiian goddess of fertility, and Mago, the creator goddess in Korean mythology. And they all have different types of presence in both of your works. In Heesoo's your work, Mago is this ginormous bodily presence. Mago is sort of taking over the screen, and your other avatar is able to lay on. She's almost like the entire land itself. But for Qianqian, the work for Haumea and Mazu, it's just the voice that's telling us this story. So I want to ask you both, what were your artistic choices in thinking how to represent these goddesses in your work? How come one is without a bodily presence in the work? And how come one is that takes up the entire screen?
So just if I can just give some brief explanation about the video. So the 3D avatars in my video were all my ancestors. I 3D modeled my female ancestors whom I ever met in person in my life, and myself, and the autobiographical feminist religion I initiated, Muslim, which also visualizes avatar. So they were the characters in the video, and the main character exploring the whole garden and sky and everything was me. And so the giant body, the Mago in my video was my great grandmother from father's side, and I was inspired by Mago myth. It's a creation myth in Korean shamanism, which I never learned about before I took a class in college. I took a class called Korean One's History class. Yeah, I studied. I was in Korea and took the class, and it was my first time to learn about the goddess creation myth ever in my life. Like there's other different kind of myths I learned from like school and like everywhere, mostly about the male figure and founder of the country, whatever. But I learned that the creation myth, the Mago myth, was really sacred and respected in the past. But through the patriarchal history, it was degraded like monster story. So it was like giant, like great giant creator created whole like universe, the sky and all the creatures and the land, everything. But later it became some kind of monster living in the like small mountain. So I was quite shocked to learn about that. I always wanted to reimagine that myth. And in my video, I visualized Mago as my great grandma because she's the oldest ancestor I ever met in my life in person. And the reason why I wanted to visualize like a big body because I think like, so one of my intentions for my whole practice is I'm positioning myself as historian and creator of my lay Muslim practice, and because I never the giant creator female goddess myth I never learned about, and not many people heard about. Like the fact that it's neglected and degraded like made me to think about how I can empower it again, and through my family history and my ancestors and my own body. So I felt very catharsis, yeah, like while I'm making the video, and literally I was like so thrilled to see giant, body like of my great grandmother. And also part of the myth was saying the Magu goddess body part, her own body part became the landscape too. So I imagined my great grandmother's body as part of the land in the Limson garden.
If I could introduce a little bit about the piece itself first as well. So the piece Plastia is a latest chapter of a series of work called Kaihai. So the word Kaihai is a hybrid of ocean, the word ocean in Hawaiian and Chinese. So at the core of this project is always about the dialogue between Tiare and me. Tiare is my collaborator on this project, who is an indigenous filmmaker based in Honolulu. The project started during pandemic, when I spent a lot of time panning the Google Earth, the digital globe to go home. My home is a coastal city in Southeast China, and I'm based in LA. And at the time, Tiare was based in Bay Area, and her home is in Hawaii. So we spent a lot of time thinking about what does the ocean mean to us? Like, how can we get closer to home with some work? So we decided to make a project together, but at that time we didn't know what we're gonna make. We know that we share a lot of our interest in folklore or mythology from our background. We chat with each other about the folklores that we hear, we listened growing up. Like I told Tiare about Matsu, and Tiare told me about Hina Kuhoba Koa and Hamiya. And then we always found a lot of interesting thread between them. So respond to the question you have about the voice. So actually this is the 5th chapter of Kaihai series. The first few chapters are actually visual representations of some Hina or goddess that we couldn't find any visual image of. Like for example, the first project was a representation of Hina Puakula, who is one of the daughter of Hamiya that's mentioned actually in the Plastia dialogue today. When we search Hina Puakula on Google Earth, on Google Image, we can probably find around 30 images, and a lot of them are actually Disney Moana stereotypical representations of Hina. So we're very interested in how can we create our own representation of Hina Puakula. So now when you go back to search 3 years after we started this project, you can see half the images are from our project. But we felt we're not saying our representation should be the representation. We felt more artist work or different representation of the mythological figures should be represented. Echoing to what Heesoo said about a lot of male-centered figures are more celebrated in representations. That happens to a lot of the mythological figure happening in China or in Hawaiian culture as well. So that kind of concludes some of the earlier chapters of Kaihai. So the most recent chapter, Plastia, as you can tell, we had a few voices in the dialogue. So I narrated Matsu, and Tiare, my collaborator, narrated Hamiya, and we used a generated voice for Plastia. I think it was important for us to have this dialogue across Pacific Ocean, that when we actually recorded the audio, Tiare actually was in a big island doing a ceremony, and I was in LA, so we actually recorded the audio trans-Pacifically. So I think having us bouncing idea to each other or bouncing the story to each other was at the core of the Kaihai project. So we, in this piece in particular, we wanted us to stand back, be the narrator of the folklore, and then we have the Plastia as a front. So that was the idea behind this representation.
Yeah. I kind of love that. It's because all these mythologies are mostly passed on through oral tradition, and somehow it's become full circle. You both came up with digital representations of these goddesses, but then now you're returning to a dialogue and returning to the original form of communication of how these traditions have come to be. I think we have a little bit more time. We want to talk then about the idea about, maybe we can go about the idea of worship then, since we're talking about these goddesses and their representations. I kind of was thinking about Carrie's prompt, and she talks a lot about excavation and worship in her thesis. And these are activities that sort of demand a sort of commitment, that because we're reaching for something that's not immediately perceivable to us, and like digging for an artifact that's hidden very deep in the ground, or finding our faith in a way. So I wanted to ask how means of worship or acts of worship and excavation sort of manifest in the digital realm for both of you. Especially both of your works take us to speculative places in a way.
Mm-hmm. I think, first of all, using digital mediums to create my own rituals, like I see myself as I'm the initiator of the religion, and I see all the artworks, like 3D animations and installation, like performances, as my rituals. Like I create my own feminist ritual to convert my ancestors and myself to queer body. So, and for me, using digital medium was somewhat unavoidable choice, because I started this religion when I was in grad school, and like as a international student, I don't have access to spaces, and I can't afford space or materials after I graduated from the program, also like during the pandemic. So it was like my original practice is a lot about like material heavy installations and sculptures, but I couldn't continue that realistically. So, and also like as Chen said, there's not many physical representation or materials I can find about the my female ancestors, and I mean, like about the family history and their personal histories. So I needed to use a lot of like imagination to realize what I'm envisioning and what I desire between me and them. So somewhat there was something that I needed to do, and I think creating my own 3D scenes and environments, like, and it's limitless, you know, like even though like physically I couldn't afford any studio space at that time, but with my small laptop and in my bedroom, I could like extend my whole garden or universe. Like I can like add more and more and more, and I can there is no limit to give the second life to my female ancestors in the digital space. So I see working in digital medium as really empowering tool for me to reclaim and empowering my ancestors and myself. So I think it's really it gives me a lot of emotional satisfaction as well, and also like realistically makes sense conceptually too.
Thank you so much, Heesoo, for sharing that. And I think our time is running out for the night, or afternoon rather. It's just so dark in here. So thank you again to Qianqian, Heesoo, and Karen for participating in the panel. Thank you all for being here for day one. We're going to have another screening starting at around 2:20, 2:30 tomorrow, and the theme will be encoding memories of home. So stay tuned for that, and I hope to see you there tomorrow if you can make it. Thank you all.